Part 2. Marcus waited until Karen's kitchen light went out before returning to the broken concrete with his crowbar. The metal tool felt cold against his sweaty palms as he worked to widen the cavity he'd discovered. Each scrape of metal against concrete seemed to echo through the quiet neighborhood. The hollow space was larger than he'd initially thought, roughly the size of a shoebox. As chunks of concrete fell away, his flashlight beam revealed something wrapped in what looked like heavy plastic sheeting, sealed with duct tape that had somehow remained intact despite years of moisture and pressure. His hands trembled as he pulled the package from its concrete tomb. It was heavier than expected, and there was an odd rigidity to whatever lay inside the plastic. Marcus set it on his patio table under the dim glow of his back porch light, staring at it as if it might explode. The rational part of his mind screamed to call the police immediately, but another part, the part that had spent 8 years dealing with Karen's controlling behavior and entitled attitude, wanted answers first. He found a utility knife in his tool shed and carefully cut through the duct tape. The plastic sheeting peeled away like the layers of an onion, revealing another layer. Underneath, then another. Karen had been thorough in her wrapping. When the final layer fell away, Marcus stumbled backward, nearly knocking over his patio chair. A human skull stared back at him from the table, its empty sockets seeming to accuse him in the dim light. Fragments of other bones were wrapped alongside it, what looked like pieces of ribs, parts of arms, sections of a spine. Not a complete skeleton, but enough to make Marcus's stomach lurch. His phone was in his hand before he consciously decided to call anyone. But instead of 911, he found himself dialing his brother David, a criminal defense attorney who'd gotten him out of more scrapes than he cared to remember. "Marcus? It's almost midnight. David, I need you to come over, now, and don't ask questions over the phone." 20 minutes later, David Chen stood in Marcus's backyard, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled from being dragged out of bed. At 45, he was 3 years older than Marcus, but looked younger. His dress contained in expensive suits and careful diet rather than showing on his face. "Jesus Christ, Marcus." David stared at the bones laid out on the patio table. "Please, tell me you didn't kill someone." "Of course I didn't kill anyone. I found these in the concrete when I demolished my pool." David pulled out his own flashlight, examining the remains more carefully. "These have been here a long time. Look at the condition. Completely clean, no soft tissue. We're talking years, maybe decades." The concrete was poured when the pool was built 12 years ago. I have the construction records. So whoever this was died before then. David straightened up, his lawyer instincts taking over. "The question is, did you know about this when you bought the house?" "Of course not. David, I've been swimming in that pool for 8 years. My daughters learned to swim in there." The thought made Marcus nauseous. "If I'd known there was a body buried underneath—" "Calm down. We need to think this through logically." David began pacing, a habit Marcus remembered from their childhood. "Who owned the house before you?" "The Hendersons. Elderly couple, moved to Florida. They seemed normal, brought us cookies when we moved in, sent Christmas cards for a few years." "What about before them?" Marcus tried to remember the property disclosure documents from his purchase. "I think a single woman. I remember because our realtor mentioned she'd lived there for decades before selling to the Hendersons." David nodded slowly. "We need to find out who that was. But first, we need to decide what to do about this." He gestured toward the remains. "What do you mean, decide? We call the police." "Marcus, think about what happens next. The moment we call this in, your property becomes a crime scene. They'll tear apart your entire yard looking for more evidence. Your house could be sealed off for weeks while they investigate. Sarah and the girls are in Portland visiting her mother for another week. That's lucky, but it doesn't change the bigger picture. Once this becomes public, the media will descend. Suburban father discovers body in backyard pool. Your family will never have privacy again." Marcus sank into a patio chair, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. "So, what are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything illegal, but we have options. We could quietly contact the cold case division, let them handle it discreetly. Or..." David paused, studying his brother's face. We could find out what really happened first. Knowledge is power, Marcus. Right now, someone else knows the truth about these remains, and they're probably panicking. Karen, your neighbor? What makes you think? Marcus filled David in on Karen's bizarre behavior, her desperate offer to pay him to keep the concrete debris, her cryptic comment about secrets being better left buried. She knows something, Marcus concluded. Maybe she knows everything. David was quiet for a long moment, staring at the bones. If that's true, then calling the police right now might not be the smartest move. What do you mean? Think about it. If Karen is involved in this death, whether as a perpetrator or an accomplice, and she realizes you found the remains, what's her next move? She could destroy evidence, skip town, or... David's voice trailed off. Or what? Or decide that you're a threat that needs to be eliminated. The words hung in the night air like a physical presence. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he considered the implications. You think I'm in danger? I think we need more information before we make any moves. And I think we need to be very careful about how we get it. They carefully rewrapped the remains and secured them in Marcus's garage, hidden behind his workbench. David insisted on staying the night, setting up on the couch where he could watch both the front and back approaches to the house. Don't go anywhere alone tomorrow, he warned as they locked up, and don't let Karen know we found anything. Marcus barely slept, every small sound in the house making him jolt awake. When dawn finally broke, he found David in the kitchen, laptop open, surrounded by printouts and coffee cups. I've been doing some research, David announced without preamble. The woman who owned your house before the Hendersons was named Margaret Tolliver. She lived there for 38 years before selling in 2012. That's just 2 years before I bought it from the Hendersons. Right. Margaret was 74 when she sold, moved into assisted living. Here's where it gets interesting. She died 6 months later. Marcus poured himself coffee with shaking hands. Natural causes? Heart attack, according to the obituary. But Marcus, look at this. David turned his laptop screen around, showing a newspaper article dated 15 years earlier. Margaret Tolliver reported her adult son missing in 2010. James Tolliver, age 42, disappeared without a trace. Police investigated but never found any leads. The coffee cup slipped from Marcus's hands, shattering on the kitchen floor. You think those bones... I think we need to find out more about James Tolliver's disappearance. And I think we need to understand Karen's connection to all of this. As if summoned by her name, a sharp knock echoed from the front door. Marcus, and David exchanged glances before approaching cautiously. Through the peephole, Marcus saw Karen standing on his porch, but she looked different, haggard, with dark circles under her eyes and clothes that appeared to have been slept in. Don't answer it, David whispered. But Karen had seen the movement. At the door. Marcus, I know you're in there. We need to talk. It's about what you found last night. Marcus's blood ran cold. She knew. Somehow she knew exactly what he'd discovered. Please. Karen's voice carried through the door, and for the first time since he'd known her, she sounded genuinely afraid. There are things you don't understand. Things that could get us both killed if you're not careful. David grabbed Marcus's arm, shaking his head firmly. But Marcus found himself reaching for the deadbolt anyway. If she wanted to hurt me, she wouldn't come to the front door in broad daylight, he reasoned. Marcus, don't... But the door was already opening. Karen stepped inside quickly, glancing nervously over her shoulder as if checking for surveillance. Thank God, she breathed. I was up all night worrying you might have called the police already. How did you know what I found? Marcus demanded. Karen's laugh held no humor. Because I've been watching that concrete for 12 years, terrified that someday someone would break it open. When I saw you out there with the flashlight, then your brother showing up in the middle of the night, she shrugged. It wasn't hard to figure out. So, you admit you know about the remains. I know about a lot more than the remains. Karen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I know who killed James Tolliver. I know why he was buried under your pool. And I know that if certain people find out he's been discovered, we're all dead. David stepped forward, his lawyer instincts taking over. Who are these certain people? Karen's eyes darted between the two brothers. You really want to know? You want to open that door and see what's behind it? Marcus nodded slowly, though every instinct screamed at him to say no. James Tolliver wasn't just some missing person, Karen began. He was a witness. 20 years ago, he saw something he shouldn't have seen. Someone very powerful wanted him silenced permanently, but James was smart. He had insurance, documents, photographs, recordings, evidence show. Marcus arrived at Sterling Construction 15 minutes early, parking his rental car across from the gleaming office complex that, as of yesterday, he owned. The irony wasn't lost on him. Victoria had spent years terrorizing neighbors from a building that belonged to his family. The receptionist, a nervous young woman with kind eyes, barely looked up. Mr. Chen, Mrs. Sterling is waiting in conference room A. Marcus followed the polished hallway, passing framed photos of Sterling Construction's projects, shopping centers, office buildings, and dozens of residential developments, all built on land his uncle had owned, all generating wealth that had flowed into Victoria's empire. Victoria Sterling sat at the head of a mahogany conference table, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun, her navy suit armor against the world. She didn't stand when Marcus entered, didn't offer pleasantries. Her pale blue eyes studied him like a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. So, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Raymond's nephew. Marcus will do fine. I knew your uncle well. 15 years of business, always professional, always reasonable. She leaned forward. I'm hoping that trait runs in the family. Marcus pulled out a chair directly across from her, maintaining eye contact. That depends on what you consider reasonable. Victoria's laugh was sharp as winter air. Let's dispense with games, shall we? You inherited property. I need that property. We can make this work for both of us. The way you made my driveway work for both of us? That was unfortunate. A miscommunication between departments. Her expression didn't change. But that's behind us now. I'm prepared to offer you significantly above market rate for the industrial complex. 20% over assessed value. Marcus opened his briefcase, withdrawing the lease agreement and spreading it across the table. I've had time to review. Our current arrangement. Your lease expires in 26 days. A minor administrative detail. We'll renew naturally. Will we? Marcus flipped to page 7, pointing to the morality clause. Section 12.3 states that the lease can be terminated immediately if the tenant engages in unlawful or unethical business practices. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. And? Vandalism is unlawful, Victoria. Destruction of property, using your construction equipment and crew to attack a private citizen's home. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling to a video. Mrs. Henderson has security cameras. Amazing what 83-year-olds invest in these days. The video showed Sterling construction trucks arriving at 4:47 a.m., workers unloading equipment, Victoria herself directing the operation from the passenger seat of the lead vehicle. Victoria stared at the phone screen, her face pale. That proves nothing. It proves everything. You ordered the attack, you supervised it, you used company, resources to commit a crime. Marcus pocketed the phone. The police are very interested in this footage. What do you want? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus had imagined this moment, but the reality felt different, heavier. This woman had terrorized an entire neighborhood, destroyed lives with the casual cruelty of someone swatting flies. Now she sat across from him, suddenly small and fragile. First, you're going to resign from the HOA, effective immediately. Victoria's hands clenched. The HOA board won't accept. They will when they see the video. When they realize you've been using your position to wage personal vendettas. When they understand that keeping you means lawsuits, insurance claims, and criminal investigations. What else? Full restitution to every homeowner you forced out through harassment. The Patels, the Johnsons, the Martinez family you drove away last year. Documentation shows clear patterns of discriminatory enforcement. Victoria's breathing became shallow. That would bankrupt me. Should have thought of that before you declared war on the neighborhood. Marcus leaned back in his chair. But I'm not unreasonable. Your lease renewal comes with new terms. Market rate rent, plus a community fund payment of $5,000 monthly. That money goes directly to neighborhood improvements, playground equipment, street repairs, things that actually help residents instead of oppressing them. And if I refuse, then you have 26 days to find new headquarters for Sterling Construction. Good luck explaining to your clients why you're suddenly homeless. Victoria stood abruptly, pacing to the window overlooking the construction yard, where dozens of workers moved like ants around heavy machinery. You have no idea what you're doing. This company employs 200 people. You destroy me. You destroy their livelihoods. I'm not destroying anything. I'm offering you a path forward. Take it, and Sterling Construction continues operating. Your employees keep their jobs. You keep your business, just without the neighborhood terrorism. And the criminal charges? Marcus considered this. The video evidence was damning, but prosecution would tie everything up in courts for years. Dropped, in exchange for your resignation and the restitution payments. Consider it community service. Victoria returned to her chair, her movements mechanical. The board will need to vote on the resignation. Then call an emergency meeting. Tonight. Marcus, you're making a mistake. The HOA provides structure, maintains property values. By terrorizing families? By forcing people to sell their homes because their garden gnomes don't match your aesthetic vision? Marcus gathered his papers. The HOA will survive without you. Maybe it'll actually start serving the community instead of your ego. Victoria's intercom buzzed. Mrs. Sterling, there are 2 police officers here to see you. Marcus smiled. I may have mentioned that new evidence had come to light regarding the vandalism incident. The conference room door opened, and officers Rodriguez and Matthews entered. Rodriguez nodded to Marcus before addressing Victoria. Mrs. Sterling, we'd like to ask you some questions about the incident at 247 Maple Grove Lane yesterday morning. Victoria looked at Marcus, her eyes cold with fury and something else. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. I'll need to call my attorney. That's your right, Rodriguez said. But we have video evidence showing Sterling construction vehicles at the scene. This goes much easier if we cooperate. As the officers began their questioning, Marcus gathered his belongings. At the door, he paused. Victoria, for what it's worth, your uncle spoke highly of your business acumen. He said you built something impressive here. Marcus gestured around the office. Don't throw it all away because you couldn't stop playing dictator. He left her there, flanked by police officers, the empire she'd built with his family's property, suddenly feeling very fragile indeed. Outside, Marcus called Mrs. Henderson. It's done, he said. She's resigning from the HOA tonight. Oh my, the old woman breathed. 42 years in this neighborhood, and I never thought I'd see Victoria Sterling brought low. Your uncle would be proud. Marcus climbed into his rental car, looking back at the Sterling construction complex. His complex now. Through the conference room window, he could see Victoria still talking to the police, her perfect composure finally cracking. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You have no idea what you've started. This isn't over. Marcus typed back, You're right. It's just beginning. HOA meeting tonight, 7 p.m. Don't be late for your resignation speech. As he drove away, Marcus realized that destroying someone's empire wasn't as satisfying as he'd imagined. But rebuilding it into something better? That might be worth everything. Part 3. The Final Concrete. The Maple Grove Community Center hadn't seen this many residents in years. Every folding chair was occupied, people stood along the walls, and the overflow crowd spilled into the hallway. Marcus arrived at 6:45 p.m. to find neighbors he'd never spoken to, nodding at him with something approaching reverence. Marcus! Tom Patterson, who lived 3 houses down, grabbed his arm. Is it true? Did you really bring down the Ice Queen? Before Marcus could answer, the room fell silent. Victoria Sterling entered through the back door, her usual confidence replaced by something brittle and desperate. She wore the same navy suit from their morning confrontation, but it hung differently now, like armor that no longer fit. The HOA board sat at a folding table at the front. Janet Walsh, the secretary who'd rubber-stamped Victoria's edicts for 5 years. Bob Martinez, whose own family had fled the neighborhood under Victoria's harassment. And David Kim, the treasurer, who'd quietly questioned Victoria's spending, but never had the courage to challenge her directly. Victoria took her place at the head of the table, but instead of commanding the room, she seemed to shrink under the collective gaze of 67 residents. Janet Walsh cleared her throat. This emergency meeting is called to order. We're here to address recent developments regarding HOA leadership. Let's cut the crap, Bob Martinez said, his voice carrying years of suppressed anger. Victoria, you terrorized my family. You made our lives hell until we sold our house at a loss and moved across town. Tonight, we're here to watch you fall. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Victoria's face flushed red. I have served this community faithfully for 7 years, she said, her voice strained. Property values have increased 30% under my leadership. We have the most desirable neighborhood in the county. Built on fear, called out Mrs. Henderson from the front row. You didn't raise PROPA.